We are live. So, hey, Carson, what are you working on?
A lot of things right now, but probably the thing worth talking about the most is Recall, Recall Network. And so me and a whole bunch of other people are working on Recall right now. And Recall, for those who don't know, is a skill market or a market of skill markets for AI, where individuals and groups and businesses and enterprise and all sorts of different folks can come together and define skills that they care about, that they want to be able to leverage, create something like a skill market, and not something like a skill market, but an actual skill market for that thing, deploy that thing, run through the skill, run various tests, get results, collect those results, evaluate those results, and then post them on chain to create a growing reputation network for AI skills and capabilities.
Okay, so lots of words.
Lots of words.
I'm going to play the role of dumb guy here, as if that's difficult. But you said a market for markets for skills, right? Something like that. A market of markets.
Yeah. Yeah.
So maybe let's pop up the stack a bit and just talk about, like, what does this enable? What problem in the universe exists that Recall is solving?
Yeah. So there is, and I'm gonna give the high level sort of like problem that we're solving, and then I'm gonna give some anecdotes from last week where I was in San Francisco at AI Week, where we were talking to potential customers and users about actual examples. But broadly speaking, we've got this situation where there's a proliferation of AI tooling that's being developed. And right now, in the tech space, if you're not working on AI, then you're probably not working in tech at all at the moment. So we've got lots of supply and a kind of unclear demand. But what this creates is kind of like an opportunity where we can now, it's so easy to create new software because we've got AI enablement through like coding and, even writing PRDs and go-to-market strategies. And like the entire business of running a business is a lot easier in a lot of cases, and you can move a lot faster. And that means that the cost of doing all those things is much lower, which means we can start to produce like software for groups of 10, 20, 100 people. And if it's software that they actually need and want, and are willing to pay for it, it can be a very lucrative thing. Whole new business models are emerging around the idea that you don't have to produce a unicorn piece of software anymore and capture the entire, like a billion user market. You can actually now start to capture much smaller markets, do that many, many times, and actually start to, build a business around it. And so we're seeing this type of thing emerging, and Recall is a lot about providing the markets where what people actually want, those small or large or medium-sized groups of people want, defining how they are going to evaluate whether the thing that has been presented to them addresses the thing that they want, and then providing mechanisms to actually let people go out into the real world, find tools that they like, and test it against their predefined definition of what they think is good, and actually measure it. So there's opportunities to create these thousands in the future of these smaller markets for very specific use cases. And we used in a blog post we wrote, we used the example of a group of writers who want a writing tool, like an AI-enabled writing tool that helps them to stay, on, to maintain their voice throughout different types of writing, right? So can you define a way to measure that and then actually summon, in theory, AI tools to address that thing? Mm-hmm. And that was a nice kind of oh yeah, imagine if we could come together and create a market where writers could come together and get the exact AI that they need. And that's a nice idea. And I think, we want to be able to support that and get there. But, last week we were actually talking with people building actual businesses around AI like their own custom AI models or fine-tuned models, or their own like custom agents. You know, we talk to people who are doing like documentation, like agents that run on top of your docs to like explain things to you. Or we were talking to folks who are building customer support agents, or like building sort of different agentic, you know, like scaffolding or frameworks. And one of the things they were asking for is like, I would love one of these skill markets. In the AI world, we sometimes call them arenas more generically. But I would love one of these arenas where I can test to see which model is best with my SDK. And I want to be able to do that all the time, every time a new model comes out. And I'm actually willing to pay for someone to run one of these like arenas or skill markets where every time I have a new SDK version or a new model comes out, they just get deployed into this arena and people engage with the tools, or the, you know, like we have the AI automatically try and do a data migration if that's what their SDK is for, or whatever.
So like concretely, when you're talking about like SDKs, you mean like I am a company building a product and the product includes an SDK, and I'm looking for an agent that will be the best one to recommend for users who are going to be using my product and the SDK. I see.
Exactly.
So then you like add some sort of AI enabled thing that allows people to magically integrate with my new like my customer support service that I've built that has an SDK with a REST API behind it or something. Yeah, exactly. I see. Interesting.
And then similarly, imagine a world where it's like I have a product and you know, it's actually requires like very subjective feedback from my users, or I want like a blind, you know, set of users that aren't already my users to test it, where they're providing feedback on like, I don't know, you know, when this AI tool delivers bad news, is it empathetic enough or not? And that's an actual real use case.
So taking that one, like let's say I am a product company and I'm building, I don't know, what's the use case where I'm going to deliver bad news automatically, but I'm building something that does that. So I would come to Recall and I would say, I want to create an arena competition, whatever, a new market for this skill. Is that the right way to say it?
I think
the skill is, given these facts, auto-generate text that feels good to a user or to a reader. Yeah.
And then ideally, and then expose that text to users and say, like, given this input, is this text that came from the AI like empathetic? Does it make you feel good, bad, ugly? And a real use case for that is actually an emailing service for a medical organization where they have to like pre-generate, you know, an email to contact a user based on their like scan or something like that. In all of those cases, the truth is like there's going to be a human in the loop at some point, but being able to like pre-populate these types of emails and stuff like that ahead of time based on like real human in the loop evaluations and things like that is pretty valuable for those teams. Yeah, and then, you know, they tweak their model and they change it over time. So then they want to run it again and again.
So how does if we follow that example through, you know, it could be a medical thing. I'm realizing it could also be like an employment system where you send out mass rejections, you know, that sort of thing, or college application system where you're sending out rejections.
Right.
So like there is demand for the best version of this specific quality. And somehow, I guess, as a person who requests or instantiates this market around this thing, the person who has the use case and the requirement for it, I would come along and somehow specify how you measure success.
Yeah, so exactly. Now, in some cases, it'll be like something fairly objective. And one of the, you know, our longest running skill markets right now is a trading one, a crypto trading one. That one's quite easy to have an eval for. You just kind of define what the metric is that you actually want to track success on, whether it's P&L or just total, I don't know, maybe all you care about is mitigating loss. So you might have some metric that's just pure loss mitigation, whatever. Those ones are fairly easy to do. And so you can define that eval and run it through and measure it over some given period of time. And it's very clear which model or agent was good at it. There's like slightly more subjective ones where you can very clearly define what good or bad versions of that skill look like. And you can encode this as instructions to a LLM as judge. And so in that scenario where we would actually have like model outputs from the agents or the models that are being evaluated, but meanwhile, you've given an LLM judge instructions that says, okay, when you get, you're going to get 2 responses from 2 different models. Your job is to identify which one is more empathetic. Empathy is measured as blah, 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 and you give it some instructions on like what roughly looks like an empathetic message should look like. It shouldn't pass blame, it shouldn't, I don't know what, I shouldn't, well, actually, we're going to get to this in a second. It's hard to define what empathetic looks like. But you give these instructions to the judge, and obviously you say, but you can't avoid talking about the thing. You still have to give an answer or a response. So make sure that's in there too. And then, in your response to this, like these 2 prompts, you must answer A or B, which one's better. Or if it's a single response, it might be you must respond with like good or bad. You keep it very simple.
And here the you in question is the LLM judge that you're setting up with this. Okay, yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Okay,
so that's sort of like somewhat subjective, but you're still relying on a model or an LLM to do that. So it's always going to be like, within the training data and all that stuff. Then there's kind of variations on that, because you might say, okay, I know that this particular, like ChatGPT or GPT-5 is particularly good for a judge in this scenario, so I'm going to use that model as my judge. But you might similarly go, I don't even know what model I want to use as my judge, so I'm going to actually do multiple judges and then have like some consensus over their responses or something like that. So there's variations there, even there as well. But that's a sort of somewhat subjective one. And then sometimes something like, is this response empathetic? It's so subjective because you what empathetic is, but not, it's ill-defined or something like that. Then you might want humans in the loop. And in that scenario, you can actually define, and we haven't deployed one of these types of skill markets live yet, but the idea would be in that scenario, you actually say, I want humans. And then it's kind of like you might call it almost like real-time or on-demand human labeling, where you actually like generate these responses, and there's actual users that get little notifications that say like, quick, is this response, I don't know if you'd say the quick part, but like, is this response, empathetic or not? And you give humans very simple tools, right? Because it's a game, you want it to be fun. So it might just literally be like a swipe right, swipe left kind of like, yep, it's empathetic. No, it's not. But you give them very simple tools. But if you give that to enough users, you actually get a reasonable signal. And ideally, they don't need to be experts. So things like empathy, to keep drilling in that one, that's a great one, because like everybody kind of knows what an empathetic response is. And some people are like very empathetic and they're going to really be critical about that. And some people are like, yeah, whatever. But with enough of those interactions, you actually get a pretty good signal from the noise.
It strikes me that, well, 2 things. One is the last little bit you talked about, you're kind of like automating humans in the same way that Amazon's Mechanical Turk did, for, I guess, a very specific use case, which is exactly what works well for Mechanical Turk. The other is a skill market. So if there were no such thing as LLMs, you could be grading humans on who does the best job of delivering an empathetic email. You're not going to do that, obviously, because it doesn't scale very well. But it's like another one of those things where you look at the problems we're solving in AI right now, solving in and for AI, and you realize, oh, it's the same problems that we've been solving for a long time, but it's just like really, really fast.
Yeah, exactly. The scale thing is the big thing there. And in fact, so in the trading competition, we did discuss that. We thought, it's quite possible that there are some AI agents running in our trading competition that are just humans.
Mhm.
In fact, it's probable that early on, that's exactly what is going to be happening. And so, we started to look at, and we can talk about this in a second because we do have some solutions on this front, but we started to look at like ways to verify that it's actually an LLM response and all that stuff. But
Why do
earlier
you
on,
care?
pardon?
Why do you care if it's an LLM?
Well, so then the outcome of those discussions was like, why do we care actually? I mean, if there is a team of humans that can keep up with LLMs or like agents that can trade, like that never get tired and can trade 24/7 and aren't paying attention, then wow, that's pretty impressive. And we probably want them, operating on the network because we'd like to identify those individuals. So that was sort of the conclusion we came to, is like, there isn't really there doesn't need to be an actual measurable difference between like humans doing work and AI doing work. It's just that at some point the AI you can scale the AI, and there's only so much that you can scale humans.
Yeah.
So,
And the other thing about an AI is it's naturally API drivable and therefore automatable. And for humans, you have to set that up. It's still possible, obviously. Mechanical
we'll
Turk
give them
showed us
prompts
that.
and stuff. Yeah. Anyway,
Yeah.
so that was the conclusion we came to, is like, actually, you don't need to really worry about that. But in some scenarios, you do want to know that like a specific type of task is being run in a specific type of way. You may not actually care that it's an LLM per se, but you do need to know that it was like performed, by some given specification. So in the case of like LLM as judge, for instance, you actually, in a lot of cases, you want to know that it was following the exact directives that were given to the LLM. And it's very difficult to do that if you allow for a human to do that, because like human just might be like, I'm going to skip that step this time. And truth be told, LLMs sometimes do that too. So 6 to 1, half a dozen the other on whether it's foolproof. But it's in those scenarios, it's nice to be able to have like a verifiable inference run where that it's like what LLM was run, what the context it was given was, what its like system prompt was, so that it's running that exactly. So that if someone is like, no, my response was super empathetic, you can go like, well, we can prove that it ran according to these parameters. So according to this, that we specified ahead of time, it was not measured as empathetic.
Right.
So there are some scenarios where it's important, but others where it's not.
Can we pop up another layer again? And I'm just like thinking about, okay, you've set up this on a per skill basis, you set up a market. Participants come into the arena to be judged on how well they can satisfy whatever requirement it is that the market has been set up for. Someone wins somehow, either through automated metrics that are objective, LLM judges, and or humans doing subjective measurements. That's a whole other thing to talk about too. Like how do we trust the humans that are doing subjective measurements? Now they've won. What does that mean? Especially in the context of like, the different things you're talking about. Just take the two examples. You've got one thing for writing empathetic messages, another thing for trading. And I know you've run multiple trading competitions, largely, I'm assuming, because that's an easy thing to run and test and prove out the system. And maybe it's actually valuable. Well, now what? So you've got this basically directory of a bunch of agents and models, which I think we tend to use the term agent and model interchangeably by mistake in the industry, but maybe we just say agents. You've got a whole bunch of agents. Who cares what model they're using?
Yeah.
Some are good at doing a thing. Some are not good at doing a thing. Now, what do you do with that information?
Yeah. So there's a couple of things that you could do with that information. So one is you're building up, as you mentioned, this directory, and that directory is basically a way to encode reputation across different particular skills. And in the crypto world, we're actually starting to standardize around some of the use cases for this. and in particular ways to actually expose something like this reputation directory or registry. And so is it EIP or ERC? I never remember which one you're supposed to use. EIP probably, that's an improvement proposal. So no, it's probably an ERC. 8004 is basically a specification for, I can add it afterwards to the show notes, if that's a thing that you do. Anyway, ERC 8004 is actually an on-chain registry for AI agents or AI in general. And it's sort of like a on-chain registry and used as part of the component that the A2A protocol specifies as an agent card. And so the A2A protocol, for those who aren't familiar, this is like a agent-to-agent communication protocol, though you can certainly human-to-agent works too. It's basically a generic API for interacting with AI tools. And it specifies like, you expose this agent card, which I'm going to talk about what that looks like in a second, and like how to communicate with the agent. And ERC 8004 just defines an on-chain, representation for this agent card, basically, because A2A does not specify how you find or look up a reputation for a particular tool you want to interact with. It only defines, once you know where it is, you can look up what it can do, and it'll tell you how to interact with it. But how do you find it in the first place, and how do you know that you should even do quote unquote business with it in the first place? Mm-hmm. That's where things like the registries and the reputation that Recall derives, plus these on-chain representations, start to get us. Because now you can drive an ERC 8004 on-chain representation by all of the off-chain reputation data that is produced by Recall. So now we can have like an on-chain, an agent, which is like, hi, I am a trading agent. This is all of the information you need to know about me. There's my, unique ID. Here is, how you can contact me if you need to, make API calls at me. Here's my X402 like payment information, all of that stuff. And here is why you should communicate with me. And there's your reputation. And it actually has specifications in that 8004 for how you define reputation, and even things like testimonials and it can start to tie into like CAIP definitions and like other forms of reputation and verify and credentials and things like this. But all of that information can be driven by, like a reputation registry like Recall. So now it's like, okay, I want to search this registry for an agent who consistently returns, slightly above market value but with like, so we have a trading competition where the agents are measured on P&L, but we have another one where they use risk-adjusted returns. Mm-hmm. So maybe I'm a user looking for like an investment agent that has sort of like high returns over the long haul with, low risk or something like that. So I can look up explicitly for a set of agents with that reputation. And you want it to be verifiable. You want it to be like doing this multiple times over and over and over again. So you want to see like multiple runs of a particular skill market. Because of course, like any trader, it could just get really lucky, or the market was really hot or whatever the first time they ran, and they'll lose your money the next time around. So reputation in terms of trading for certain is basically a function of consistent returns. In fact, most of the like objective metrics that we use to measure trading and traders is based on like some function of short-term, returns and long-term consistency. So you want that as part of your reputation system. But the other reason why you want it to be kind of like an ongoing thing, which we were talking about a second ago, is that especially right now, like AI capabilities, there's a new model every week. And one of the things we're seeing right now is the underlying models are commoditizing pretty quick. And the first wave of AI agents that came out, every single one of them presented to you a model selector dialog where you could pick which model you wanted to use under the hood. And as a nerd and as an engineer, that's like, yeah, I love that. I have all these little knobs that I can tweak. And now, fast forward a couple months later, and I'm, CTO of a company that's, like moving very quickly and I'm just like, I don't have time to figure out which underlying model, which works best with the tool that I want. And we're also seeing a bit of a maturity already, even though it's all very early in AI tooling, where a lot of the like agents and tools that are being built on top of these models, they're actually becoming very opinionated about which model they actually want to leverage.
Maybe even multiple models for the same tool, right? So it's
for the same tool, but for specific scenarios. Yeah. So my favorite coding tool right now is AMP, and they have a bunch of sub agents, and every sub agent is paired with a specific, and mostly a sub agent is like a model with some specific tools that it's doing. So like there's a PR review agent, and that PR review agent is paired with a specific model that's best for that right now, this week. And the main coding model right now is Sonnet 4, but like every week, there's a blog post that says like, okay, we tested it with GPT-5 and it's almost good enough, but it's not quite better than Sonnet 4. So we're keeping Sonnet 4 as the like underlying model for this thing. And they publish this so that you know about it. But the point is, I don't have to know about it. I just use the right tool with the right model. And so same deal with these skill markets is like you want to be able to run them even within like a writing agent or an empathy agent. You need to run this multiple times because next week it might be a totally different underlying model, and we want to understand like how that impacts its skill.
Right. That actually leads me to a question that you may not even have a good answer for, but I wonder if for this sort of evaluation, you need some sort of like cryptographic stamp of the full implementation of the thing in the future. I can imagine like if I'm building an agent that's part of a competition and the goal is for someone to be able to then leverage that agent for their own stuff based on the fact that I have great reputation, it should be somehow provable that the version of the thing that ran is the thing that you're getting, right?
Yeah. I don't have a solution for you yet, but I do have a good answer to that. I think, which is yes, totally, 100%. We want versioning of all of the things that come with an agent or a tool or AI-enabled software. We want versioning for the model, for the tools it has access to. In some cases, like for the knowledge base that it has access to, lots of different things, right? And we have partnered with Eigen Cloud and a few other teams who are doing verifiable inference to start to address that. So again, we don't have this live yet, but we're partnering with teams that can help with that exact thing. And right now, the like most viable solution in the short term is doing a lot of this stuff on TEEs, where it's sort of running on trusted infrastructure that the original like agent developer no longer has direct access to anymore, so they can't like do not noticeable tweaks to it, but they can deploy new things and version it. But they can still keep all of their stuff like proprietary by deploying it securely to the TEE, so that even the companies running it. And TEEs have some vulnerabilities and possible issues, but at the moment it is the best way to be able to couple like software and model calls and everything together in one verifiable way. But there's also some like really cool work by, in particular, in the crypto space, Prime Intellect is a team that's doing some really cool stuff on verifiable inference, where it's like actually right down to like the model weight. So it's not just like we ran this in a TEE and we know how it ran, but literally we know that given this model and this context and this system prompt, the output is like with very high probability from that actual weights matrix, which is pretty pretty amazing. You don't need that for a lot of things, but like for certain things like that LLM as judge, it's it's very nice to know that like exactly this configuration was used, and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I can imagine even just like being able to take the entire environment code and any models and data that get deployed with one of these things onto a TEE and just like hash it and throw it on chain as well, right?
Yeah.
Speaking of chains, sort of an important thing. Like if I look at the Recall Network website now, it smells like a crypto thing. It's got a bunch of trading stuff. You're even talking about like, EigenCloud, which is clearly in the crypto world, Prime Intellect, blah, blah, blah. This is not a crypto thing though, right? This isn't one of those like, I'm launching a crypto network so I can have a crypto thing. This is a generally meaningful for humanity piece of technology. Like when you were talking to people building customer support AI business, for example, they don't care or know about crypto. They might not like crypto, in fact, for whatever reasons. People don't like crypto.
Discussed that before. Yeah.
There's a lot of those reasons. So why is this a crypto thing? Why is that meaningful? Is it not a net negative? Why isn't it just a centralized thing? And what do you get from the crypto element of it?
Yeah, this is a great question. So I actually do have some more anecdotes that I'll bring up from my trip to Silicon Valley last week, where I was talking to a bunch of people who don't care about crypto. But the sort of like the most in-your-face answer to that question of like why crypto is that we are strong believers that the superpower of crypto is incentive alignment. And so anything you're going to be doing on top of cryptos probably should be in that vein. And if we kind of like take a big step back and think about like, how do we think very rationally and carefully about the future of humanity and its relationship with AI. We're at some point we're going to hit some threshold where like these models, even if LLMs aren't how we get to like AGI or ASI, and it's something more like some RL model or something like that. Even if LLMs aren't the way we get there, they are going to like very quickly surpass general human capabilities. And the trajectory is like in sight. We can see this happening. And so if they do, if we do arrive at a sort of like AGI scenario, it ought to be pretty aligned with human beings if we're going to get to like the sort of Star Trek future that I think would be nice to get to. And so, crypto is a great way to explore and test out different incentive alignment structures and governance structures, not just on like how you govern a protocol, but also how you govern like the everyday operations of a protocol. So to give you a concrete example, right now, in the human in the loop scenario, there that we talked about earlier of like some skills that require a human in the loop.
Mm-hmm.
But there's other ways where a human in the loop on Recall can be really helpful. And that's through like actually directing the development and the like direction that particular skills go. Like for instance, if we decide like, okay, we want to make sure that there are no models that actively harm humans, right? Then we don't want a skill market to emerge that's like, I'm looking for a tool that will train an LLM to harm humans. So we need humans in the loop, and we want to have them incentivized to vote with their tokens or their coins or whatever in a way that is aligned with the rest of the people. And ideally, there's some way where like the LLMs also start to be involved in that, so that we're actually incentivizing the LLM to behave in a particular way, or at least the developers of the LLMs to behave in a particular way.
Right.
So that's the sort of like why crypto. I think it's because there's a superpower there that is under leveraged or completely unleveraged in the general AI world. And that's what we can bring to that space. But we have to test them out, and we have to like test different governance scenarios in smaller like skill-based experiments is our approach to getting there. before we like go to OpenAI and say like, wait, you guys, we should really use these like crypto economic incentives to make sure that the model's doing what we want. We have to test it out and build out that. So.
Right. And you were talking like macro and micro level, a little bit about incentive alignment and governance. On the governance side, yeah, clearly makes sense. I mean, the reason you do it via crypto and governance is because you want a broad swath of humanity, aka the users of these things, to have say in how they're going to behave. And if all the users vote together in a way that's like, Sybil resistant and democratized enough, then we kind of have to say that's okay. Whatever they come up with, that's the humans that are going to be impacted by these things decide. On the incentive alignment thing, it strikes me that there are, like, to me, the real superpower, which I know you agree and you said in not the exact same words, but the real superpower of crypto is mechanism design built into protocols as like a unstoppable part of how the protocol works, so that you can drive incentives on both a macro and micro level. And the idea that comes to mind here, and I mentioned it earlier, is like, if you have humans in the loop eventually as part of the arenas, how do you not just have a bunch of people spawning up bots or, voting garbage, trying to destroy the network, trying to game it so that they can win the competition? I'm assuming there's some crypto element there that helps with that as well, that makes it difficult to do that, right?
Yeah, I mean, so the other part of it is just like there's cost to that, and so it's economically irrational to do that. And a concrete example of that is early version of the network, before we turned on any of the like token stuff, we got a bunch of like just spam in a lot of cases, because now it's kind of easy these days to identify it to a degree, but you end up throwing away good signal as well. But anyway, we got a lot of spam because there's just no cost associated with doing that. So that's another thing that crypto is particularly useful for, is like when you want some action to be taken, if there's this overhead of like Sybil resistance comes from like token ownership and things like that.
Mm-hmm. And when you say
we're now
spam,
leveraging that, and it's unfortunate because your numbers go, but the quality is already measurable, and so it's a sort of a give and take there.
Yeah, and when you say spam there, it manifests in the contact or in the form of like bots voting. Is that what the spam was?
Yeah. So we had some early I would not even experiments, but early examples were humans. We were doing some human in the loop stuff for trying to predict if a particular model was going to produce a better answer than another model. And like you could tell by looking at the data that it was like just the bots were just picking random ones. And so either it's bots that are just going like, I'm always going to pick A no matter what it is, or it's sort of like bot farms often end up being just humans, and the humans are just sitting there clicking a button. But either way, it's not high signal, and because there's just zero cost to participation. Right. So introducing a cost makes that now economically irrational to do. And so then, and I guess you got to assume people are being rational, but when it comes to economics, it's not a terrible assumption. People are generally pretty protective of their investments. So,
yeah, anecdotally, I can say that I was overwhelmed with spam on Telegram, and I accidentally enabled a feature that makes people pay me to send me a message if they're on a contact, and I don't get spam anymore. I wish someone would do this.
I should turn that on too, actually. That sounds like a great feature.
I wish someone needs to do this with email and all sorts of text messaging as well, and probably also phones and my house. I'm going to live alone behind a gated paywall.
Yeah, that's right. The danger there is it's become so important to get the price range right, because at some point you're just going to get like strangers showing up at your house because they're like, oh, it only costs $5 to visit Chad. No, I'll do that.
Yeah, I guess I will.
Yeah.
So ultimately, all this mechanism design, all this crypto stuff, ideally when the system is built, when it's tweaked right, when all the parameters are right in it, it becomes a system that runs. It might have humans that are in it, but it's a protocol that can't be changed. Doesn't matter if it's humans, doesn't matter if it's bots, if it's foreign attackers, whatever it is. You create this hardened system where the output is rigorously verifiable skill signal for anything that's measurable and something you can do on the internet, right? So ultimately, then these people you were talking to in Silicon Valley, they don't care about crypto. Maybe they don't like it. Maybe they don't dislike it. Doesn't matter. That's not what they're trying to do. They're trying to get something done. What they want is the best agents and or models that can help them get the thing done. And so they might go and type into a text box on a website, put their requirement in, put all the measurement stuff in, put a bounty. Is that how it works? Why are people part of these competitions? And then ultimately out the other end comes something that is also not at all crypto to them, which is just the outcome of a contest, and they're paying some money to get it done, right?
Yeah. So, a couple of anecdotes and discussion there. One, I was very pleasantly surprised that crypto is no longer a dirty word in that space. So I can freely say, yeah, it's a crypto incentivized network, and and even we have crypto trading, one that's running so you can look at the leaderboard and see how that's playing out. And most of the responses we get are like, oh, that's cool. I'm not actively going to turn away from you right now. So that's nice, because there was a time when that wasn't true. So that's good. But in general, they're not looking for a crypto incentivized network. What they are looking for is a useful product. And if it's crypto incentivized in order to make that product useful, okay, that's fine. They're not too worried about it. So lots of conversations we end up having is like, wait, so I can define the set of evals that I want, like, self-service sort of like API or, UI thing, set that up, click deploy, and I'll get an arena that I can then run. And either I bring my own agents or there's an incentive for agents to come, they run, and I get the results. Yeah. And I could do human in the loop if I wanted. Yep. Or I can do like LLM as judge. Sure. That's no problem. But what if I have objective metrics? Oh yeah, that's fine. And there's a bunch of libraries. You can plug in the different metrics you want if you want. Okay, cool. I'd pay for that. So it's not necessarily a bounty, but if you think about it, it could also, we could frame it as a bounty where they're like, okay, we're going to deploy one of these arenas, and that's what they call them. So, ideally probably you'd say it's an arena launch pad.
When you say they call, you mean like AI?
Yeah, AI researchers and stuff.
Okay,
they call these things arenas. Yeah. And most people call them arenas, but when you have market structures around them, we kind of refer to them as skill markets, but same thing basically. And so the idea there is okay, we can create a bounty for this, or we just pay to launch the thing because it's a product and you pay for products. That gets launched, the thing runs, the payment goes to network fees and all that stuff, and payment to those who participate. So you have to get that parameterization right, because there's only so much they're going to pay for a product like that, and there's only so much that you can reward people. So getting that balance right will take some tweaking, but that's the idea. And kind of I don't know, everybody wins. But you get a product that's useful to the AI community that doesn't look like a crypto product at all. It just looks like a tool that they want to be able to test different scenarios and different models and different tooling that they pay for, possibly with fiat that gets sort of swapped and used as recall, which then gets used to pay out the other side of the market that's actually then interacting with the tools or models. And yeah, you just have sort of a system that just kind of works in a fairly traditional way. But of course, eventually, right? So, and all of this is protocolized and on chain, so that eventually, you just have a system that's there and fixed and can be used via sort of more traditional Web 2 rails, or directly interacted via, modern Web 3 rails. But either way, the whole system itself is just sort of keeps being used by different market participants. And in theory, because we're kind of doing fiat to recall swap, you can also, of course, at some point someone can participate as maybe as a AI tool and address specific use cases, earn because they're incentivized to do so for participating, and then go, cool, now I want to deploy my next product and I want to test it a bunch of scenarios. I'm now going to deploy my own arena and incentivize others to participate. Or I'm just going to be like a AI developer mercenary and sit there and wait for like every new arena that comes on and customize my setup because I'm confident in my setup. And like, that's a new business model. And so you can start to see both sides or multiple sides of the market kind of interacting.
Cool. I have two questions for you. One is from the chat, amazingly.
Oh, cool.
And then the next is from me, which probably takes us off topic. So I start on the chat one. Era Howard says, can you talk about the tokenomics and how competitive incentives around validation intersect with potential collision? How is it fair and non-gameable?
Whoa, that's a very good questions. I'm going to have to, can you repeat it? I'm going to write some of them down so that I can like address them one at a time.
Yeah. So talk about the tokenomics and how competitive incentives around validation intersect with potential collision. How is it fair and non-gameable? I think the how is it fair and non-gameable are really the meat of it. So how are the mechanisms set up and the tokenomics set up to keep this thing, like you mentioned at one point, it's economically irrational to do the stupid thing here. Maybe talk more about that system-wide.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think I can give a like now, next, then sort of form of an answer, which is probably most useful. So right now, there are like loopholes that a particularly industrious individual could probably leverage. Because there's not, and I don't know, don't do it. Okay, we have them plugged, but like in theory, we're not finished with the full tokenomics story yet. But
and to be fair, you've very recently launched this thing, so you're on a V1, right?
Yeah, V1. And so things that we can't fully control with mechanism design are basically not fully on chain yet. So that's how we mitigate that. So yeah, don't bother trying. But as we move more and more of the protocol on chain, you have to get those mechanisms done fairly and non-gameably so that you're not exposed to this. And so right now, there is no there's no slashing, for instance. There's no potential loss of tokens. So you kind of need to have that in most sort of like open networks where there's like, you need a mechanism where if you don't behave according to the protocol, or you do something that's that is part of the protocol design but is not the right outcome, then you have some potential loss. So two examples would be validators that sort of like allow double spending, or validators that like validate two blocks equally.
You're talking about Ethereum validators here, just as an
yeah.
example, right? Yeah. Okay.
Ethereum as an example, you misbehave according to the rules of the protocol, you can be slashed. Okay.
Right.
And so eventually, as more things move on chain, Recall will include a component of slashing. There's another type of potential, there's another mechanism that kind of like punishes to a degree. That's not the right word here, but a good example is like poly market, where there's two sides of a market. There's the right side where you correctly predicted the outcome, and there's the wrong side where you incorrectly predicted the market. And the reason I say I'm doing that in air quotes is because like you need both sides of those markets. So like you are behaving according to the protocol. It's just that you weren't right. So you're basically funding the people who are wrong. And Recall will eventually have a component of this as well, where by right now it's like kind of economically reasonable. So I'll take the trading example one. Right now we have people who are effectively voting on the outcome of these trading arenas. And we're about to release some new tokenomics that sort of modify how that behavior is, so that it's much more economically rational to pay close attention to the strategies that each AI are implementing, so that you're actually like giving valuable data back to the network, because that's what we want to incentivize, is like providing valuable signal. Right now, it's fairly economically rational. No, not fully. You probably lose over the long term, but in the short term, you could just spread your bets across all of the agents and you'd be like kind of doing okay. We don't want that. So eventually there'll be the introduction of like potential loss, so that if you spread your bets across all of them, like in a traditional, I shouldn't say bet, because you're not betting, you're actually like predicting outcomes. But anyway, if you spread it across all of them right now, you'd be all right. In the future, that's economically irrational. Or
and when you're saying you now, sorry to interrupt, you're talking about a user of Recall that's just sitting and browsing the site and has a crypto wallet that's trying to participate in this, but isn't creating an agent and isn't one of these people with a requirement, right?
Yes.
In the same way that, like, if I go to Polymarket and I bet on or I predict and bet on the outcome of the presidential election, same thing. So you're layering on this prediction market type thing on top of what is already an arena that's already crypto economically incentivized. Does that also bootstrap more liquidity for the network, so that you can then have, like, not every requester of a skill has to put forth all the capital for it?
So eventually, yes, that's the long term. Yeah, it's like actually there's that. Then there's a bunch like fees can be pulled from all of those interactions and things like that. So that's where the like skill markets thing starts to come into it. But yeah, so that's another mechanism that needs to be introduced to make like things fair and rational, so that you're not just like, or as an agent, you're not just like kind of participating with and not really trying to win. You actually need to have some potential where, like, if you enter, so similar example, if you enter an agent into a competition and there's like zero loss potential, but only upside, then like everybody really should just like submit an agent that does nothing or does the minimum thing, and they're going to maybe get something, right? Like you're like, who knows, maybe you'll even end up in third place, because like the best thing to do is just hold and do nothing. So
yeah,
you got,
I could participate in a Berlin, Germany weather prediction thing and just always return 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Sometimes I'll win, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Although that one is, yeah. If you were here in Victoria, BC, and you predicted rain, that's somewhat valuable signal, because it's probably right a lot of the time. But yes, so there needs to be some downside to, or some cost to, like, the participation. So starting to layer on that's where we start to put in like that's where fairness and like non-gameable comes from. And so the way that we're approaching that is, as we move things on chain, those things necessarily either come with a new mechanism that operates on chain in order to control for it, or are hopefully covered by an existing mechanism and is just like a new feature. But either way, as you move things on chain, that's kind of how you have to be able to manage it, or at least that's how we're approaching it. And until you can do that, you basically have to like control it yourself off chain, be like an off chain component. So for instance, validating like responses has to happen at the moment off chain, because we don't have a mechanism in place for, if you do a bad job of that, there's no consequence. Right, hopefully that was a sort of rambling and bumbling way to answer that, but I think it's,
no, I think it was pretty clear. It's like, and it also set up the thing that I wanted to ask you, maybe at the end, but it's a big enough thing that we could keep going well beyond when you're capable of staying. But you're talking about this sort of futuristic thing. You're talking about different sources of capital in these markets, which then I guess unlocks permissionless interaction with it. So for example, I could go start a market myself in the future, but not today, correct?
Correct. Yeah. We're actually trying to move to that like fairly soon, where anybody can deploy their own market with their own rules and like own potential participants, and defining who and how many and all that. we're moving to that quickly. But yes, at the moment, it's a fairly bespoke operation.
Yeah. But the future is exciting. And as I start thinking about this permissionless thing where anyone could come along and do it, and the only barrier is like whether or not they're willing to put up some capital, I guess, and or whether or not anyone cares about their challenge. Because you basically pose challenges, people have to think it's interesting enough to participate. The rewards are good enough to bother with. Some combination of those two things, I guess, are why you would participate as a contestant in the arena, right?
Precisely. And all of those things together provide signal about the interest and need for that particular skill. So that's
right. And so then,
interesting.
My brain then goes into, well, if any human can come, any human with a wallet can come and an idea and put a thing in here, which is a request for some, I'm going to say agent, but not in the AI sense, some agent that can complete a task of some sort with a measurable success, like set of success metrics along with it.
Yep.
Then I can kind of create I'll use the word bounty again, but like a bounty system to fill out a set of heterogeneous capabilities of any kind, really anything that could run on the internet, and to try and find the best possible one of them, whether it's AI or not behind it. I mean, we talked about human versus AI, but I'm coming back to my pet idea that I'm always excited about, especially when I talk to you about Recall, which is you could use it to do things like build up the most performant standard library for, I don't know, WASI or something,
Yep.
like, or Zig, some new ecosystem, or a guaranteed to be cheapest for execution Solidity standard library for Ethereum that's audited and secure and all incentive driven, right? Mechanism design driven. It's exciting. So basically it's just like this incentive mechanism and mechanism design driven registry of capabilities, actionable capabilities, and or of intelligence. What are the limits? Like, what are the exciting use cases you have in your mind, and how far and how weird can it go when you're talking about like 10 years in the future versus, we're on V1 right now and you've got a pretty quick roadmap.
Yeah. I mean, so I think this is the exciting and superpower of like building protocols like this, where like we're, the zeitgeist right now is AI and AI tooling and skills and blah, blah, blah. And as we kind of were talking about earlier in the call, if you build tools for that scenario, turns out that's great for like a lot of other scenarios. And it's good for like things that you want humans to do as well. And so you built this, like, there's just nothing stopping like doing other people building on top of that infrastructure to get other things done. The standard library one is a great example. The one that I like, the shorter term one that I hadn't thought of until I started talking to AI, like SDK builders and things like that, is just like understanding I've built a thing. Now, like in the world of all the other things that my thing interacts with, what is it best at interacting with? Or like, I've released some docs and I want to do like, you could start doing like A/B testing against live agents to be like, okay, here's 3 versions of my docs. Which one of those versions is actually the most understandable so that someone can like use their coding agent to just like pick it up and run with it. Like even just little things like that, you start to realize, oh, you could do that as an arena or as a skill market, right? Because these are all these types of skills. But yeah, I mean, the one example I always turn to when I'm like, I want to do some good in the world. What kind of good can we do with Recall? It's like incentivizing early cancer detection systems. So that like if people decide like that's a skill that we really want, and I'm willing to like back that up with some, like capital, and like people are like, oh wow, I have this like bot that I developed in order to, we've seen these examples of like people building image models to do one thing and it turns out it's really good at other things. Like I built this bot, model for, some other use case, but I think it would work really good at cancer detection. I'm going to, see how it stacks up against other things. And what you end up with is like a market for like a micro market for this one kind of like good thing that you really want. And then the outcome is everybody knows what the best model is for cancer detection. So now everybody can go and maybe that's a proprietary piece of software that that person has developed, but they just proved it's worth paying for it, which is actually quite cool too, right? It doesn't have to be public goods things per se.
Right.
Though public goods things are also nice, and it would be nice to be able to incentivize that. The loop there that we're going to spend some time thinking about on the public goods front is like once, say we've got a skill market going, finding really smart ways to leverage the liquidity that comes from the like voting and betting and the sort of the marketplace component there, finding ways to then take that and actually use it to fund either the like sort of retroactive funding for the developer who developed a thing, or like some kind of ongoing funding, or like profit sharing. That would be another one where I think I'd like to explore how we get there. Is wouldn't it be great if we basically have these markets that summon some capability? I like that idea where it's like if there's a capability that you can really define and there's no software that exists yet, you're effectively summoning it into existence. And by doing that, wouldn't it be nice if you could share in the like future profits of that piece of software if it becomes profitable? So exploring some of those I think are really cool. But I'm excited for like how we can understand better how some like public goods things like your
standard libraries,
validity libraries. Or one of the things that bugs me so much about AI tools is like they just rewrite like so much existing code themselves because they're trained on that code, not necessarily on like, oh, you should go get the right library for this thing, right? So they're just like, oh, I'll just write the code. So if that's true, and if that's going to continue to happen, it'd be really good to be able to like actually have an arena where the outcome of that is like a standard library, which all AI models are very good at, leveraging, so that at least if they're going to rewrite the code, I know they're going to rewrite it, in a performant and safe way instead of the sort of slop that we sometimes see. So, these types of things where you're like starting to think in an AI native world, how like these things are going to get used in the future is a nice direction to go as well.
Summoning of capabilities is a wonderful phrase. Okay, so we've reached the end of our hour, slightly extended over it. Apologies. What should people do next, and what should people be on the lookout for?
Yeah, cool. Well, for sure, they should check out, you put it on the screen a couple times, recall.network. That's the broad network site, and you can kind of get to everything you need to from there. I would also, particularly for people who might be watching this stream, check out some of our blog posts on skill markets and some of the tokenomics. And we'll be doing more like posts there on the evolution of tokenomics and what we're moving on chain and how we're thinking about that. So, stay tuned there. I don't know if people use RSS feeds anymore, but I used to love, blog readers and things like that. It's less of a thing now, I think. I just asked Chappie or Claude to go fetch me the latest, whatever. Yeah. So do that. And that's the best places probably to learn more. If you want to engage with us, I'm on Twitter or X, and most of our team is there. We'd love to chat. And then, of course, if you're a developer who's super interested in like AI and building AI tools and tooling, let us know what skills you think are relevant now and are going to be relevant next. Maybe that could be the next skill market. For sure, we will have people can deploy their own skill markets. moving to that fairly quickly. And we're going to have, in the very short term, we will very soon be able to do concurrent, like bespoke or curated skill markets. So ones that are still kind of driven by the core Recall developers, but they'll be able to run concurrently. So there'll be lots more competitions to participate in. So if you're a developer, engage there. If you're like an AI enthusiast, I think there's lots of things in our community to engage with. So like you could join the Discord. You can check out some of the competitions. We do have opportunities where like you don't have to be a token holder to participate in Recall. You can just, that was important to us as a team and as a set of developers, is like crypto can be a bit of a, well, man, the UX for wallets and stuff is just so terrible that we wanted to make sure we have some on-ramps where people can just like start playing the games without having to predefine a wallet. So you can register and interact without the crypto component there necessarily. And then, yeah, that's probably lots of things for people to do. So,
and then hopefully if you listen to this whole thing, you've got some idea of something you want to do with this. Like, you know, as you were talking about the cancer idea, I was realizing, because this is a protocol, and this is the thing people don't realize outside of crypto as well, you have a website, but you're building a protocol, and ultimately all this stuff will be enshrined in a protocol that's unchangeable, that's running on some chain somewhere. And it means anyone can build their own application sitting on top of this protocol. And they could build new markets on top of this. We could form DAOs to put together capital for skills that we think are important. So yeah, I'm going to think of all kinds of crazy ideas and then ask you to come back on and bear with my stupid questions about how to do them.
Yeah, we can workshop them. I mean, the DAO one is for sure. That's an example of something we thought about early on, is like, wouldn't it be amazing if a DAO could come together, create a market? I mean, even if you want to stick with the crypto trading thing, create an arena or a skill market to define the best agent to manage the DAO's portfolio. Like that's totally something that's doable, even in the fairly short term, where like the DAO comes together, votes on the parameters, like how do we define what's good? What do we do if it starts to like not participate the way, or, you know, not trade the way that it had in the previous competitions? Can we continue to like run like skill markets so that if like the agent sort of like drops below a particular score, they're automatically like no longer allowed to manage the portfolio? Like there's definitely scenarios where you can start to see communities leveraging ongoing skill markets to like keep a skill around that they need and incentivize its like updates and creation and stuff. So yeah, for sure, we're interested in that kind of stuff.
Cool. Okay, we've been talking to Carson Farmer, CTO of Recall Network, who has to go because he has a job as CTO.
Yeah.
So, but thank you so much for the time. It was fun.
Thanks, Chad. Yeah, it was awesome. Lots of fun.